In the last video, we modified our tab and used the access token that we obtained through the single sign-on process with Microsoft Teams to make a request to Microsoft Graph and update the user's profile photo. Now, let's go through and let's implement this a little bit farther. So now we have SSO support working, we have calls to Microsoft Graph working. Now let's use the Teamwork endpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going over back to our app, and I'm going to add in a new permission to list out all of the teams that my current user has joined. So I'm going to do that by adding a new permission for Microsoft Graph. It's a delegated permission, and I'm going to look for the permission called team.readbasic.all. Okay, and I'll go ahead and add that permission, and then I'm going to grant admin consent for that permission so we can see that listed as well. Now the next thing we need to do is I'm going to have to come back over to our app, and I need to add that to our demand that we're going to have for additional permissions. So we'll just add that like this, and this is our team.readbasic.all permission. Let's now come back over to our tab, and I need to add in a new control here that we're going to use. We're going to use a list control from Fluent UI. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to create a collection of lists of a state property that's going to contain a collection of all the teams that the current user has joined. So I'm going to create a new const for joined teams. Now I've set joined teams, and this is going to be equal to a use state. It's going to use the state hook, and it's going to be an array of anything, because you'll see we're going to change that to work with a control that with a list control works with in a second. Now the next step is to add a use callback hook that's going to be used to submit requests to Microsoft Graph for all the teams the current user has joined. So just scroll a bit farther down here. We'll just add this down here at the very bottom. Okay, so what is this doing? It's doing the same kind of request we had to get the user's photo. So it says whenever we get an access token for Microsoft Graph, I'm just going to call the join teams endpoint. And what that does is that's going to get a list of friendly team names. So I'm just going to get all the teams that were returned, and using the map function, I'm simply going to convert that to an object or an array of objects with a key, a header, and a content property. And those are all properties that the list control knows how to render. So it's going to make my life a little bit easier to render this out. Now, one thing I want to do is that when we want this to run whenever we get an access token or whenever the access token changes. So what I'm going to do is come up to our effect here and where we're getting the profile photo, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Say get all the joined teams as well. So now I have both of those. Now the last step is to update the rendering for our component. So I'm going to come down a little bit farther into our return statement, and I'm going to add in, right after the photo, I'm going to add in this code that says if the join teams property has anything in it, then I'm going to render out an H3 that tells us here are all the teams that you belong to. So I'm going to come back over to our command prompt. I'm going to start and stop the web server. And I'm doing this so that it picks up the new permission demand that we added to our environment variable. That's not something that would have been reset when we made a change there. All right, so now everything is up and running. So now let's come back over to the browser, go to our Teams instance. I'm going to click off of our tab, and then I'm going to come back in. And what we should see is the name, the photo, and all the teams the current user has joined. And there we go, you can see that. So it's pretty cool. Now we can see how we're making two requests to Microsoft Teams, one, or to Microsoft Graph, one to get the user's profile photo, and one to grab all of the teams that they've currently joined.